Applications. The internet age we find ourselves in has had a profound influence on human psychology. There was, until recently, a sense of assurance that history was somehow over. The old rules, or constructs as they came to be known, of a post-industrial world no longer applies. This line of thinking is coming under increasing scrutiny, as columns recently in newspapers entitled The End of History testify to. Personally, I think exceptionalism is a dangerous path to take. That said, I believe we've taken it. I struggle very much with technology. I believe this is, for the most part, a generational thing. I am of the analog ilk and therefore approach every challenge with physicality, always looking for the underlying issue, which sometimes leads me to overlook the obvious. This, of course, is in complete contrast to the tech-savvy millennial generation. This is not a judgment, just an observation. It may also explain the generational political voting differences witnessed in Britain and America recently. The physical world meets the intellectual. It is obvious the millennials have the technical edge, arguably over the expense of their practical skills, as a greater number relative to the preceding generation are unable to carry out simple tasks like changing a spare or hanging a shelf. I think it is reasonable to assume this would have a knock-on effect on the political voting patterns. My aim is not to point out the differences between the generations, but the similarities. Whatever about Paradise Lost, maybe hell has to be revisited. That is not to say my generation was served the greatest shit sandwich of the last century. On the contrary, the millennials got the club. However, I do remember and was in touch with the generation that last saw the world in flames. And every living person in the world today are subject to the institutions and belief systems born in the post-war period. These unnatural entities, forged in a time of desperation, are now dinosaurs, driving humans naturally towards desperation. But enough about that. Bill Gates is a household name in the tech age, but let's compare him to a giant of the preceding industrial age. Inventor Harry Ferguson was born in County Down, Northern Ireland. His list of achievements were many, but noticeably being the first man in Ireland to build and fly an aeroplane. Later he competed in Formula One, but probably his greatest achievement was the development of what became known in the agricultural industry as the Ferguson system. In simple terms, it is a hydraulically operated three-point linkage system with a PTO shaft. If I were to explain this in millennial money, I would describe it as an interface one would need to use to run a program. Think of it like this: computer equals tractor, interface equals Ferguson system, software program equals implement. It is important to note that Harry Ferguson did not invent the tractor or implement, nor did Bill Gates invent the computer or program. What they both achieved was to make a previously specialized industry product accessible to the individual. Today it is, of course, household knowledge the immense impact the PC has had on society, economics and culture. And I believe it is the single biggest culprit in driving exceptionalism, or this strange belief that history is somehow over. However, it would be a grave mistake to assume Harry Ferguson's inventions had any less of an impact. Indeed, one could argue more so. This, of course, may come as a shock to the millennial generation, but that is the stated objective of this video. Example: if you've consumed food today, whether you are a carnivore or vegetarian, your preference is organic or genetically modified, whether you are black, white, rich, poor, militant atheist, devout theist. Regardless of your geographical position on the face of this planet, chances are it was produced utilising the Ferguson system. Moreover, there is no successor to this system, none in sight, and every present tractor producer still uses the Ferguson system the world over. But let's take a look at the social economic consequences. Prior to Ferguson's inventions, tractors were for the most part operated by contractor or industry and had a small number of tasks they could be applied to, much in the same way the first computers were usually designed for and or operated by governments or large corporations to carry out specific tasks. Like the PC revolution, this all changed after the development of the Ferguson system. Tractors now could be tailored to as many or few individual requirements as were needed, thus making the tractor a viable option for most farmers. Perhaps more importantly, Ferguson neither had a patent on the tractor or implement, just a link between the two, and this stimulated a host of independent manufacturers to compete in the now burgeoning personal tractor market, which in turn drove down prices further, all of whom had to pay Ferguson a license fee to use his system. Sound familiar? The biggest loser in all of this was the horse. And nobody can talk to a horse, of course. But if they could, the horse probably would have been more than happy, as they are not naturally born with a strong work ethic and have to be forced by one means or another to adopt one. These animals now looked on as the tractor ploughed the fields they once did, while intellectuals pondered their newly given rights. Now they were afforded the luxury to do so. It is important to know using an animal to plough is relatively inefficient for two reasons. One, a mule consumes a large part of the produce being harvested, leaving one only with the excess. Two, Ferguson's first tractor was rated at 20 HP, or horsepower. That is to say, it potentially has the power of 20 horses. Although this is a rather crude conversion of biological energy to mechanical, it gains relevance when you factor in endurance. For example, the world record for non-stop ploughing is 80 hours. One man, one tractor. Obviously forcing an animal to even compete with that would be unethical. So by the time the average farmer traded in their horse for a tractor, their productivity gains increased a number of times. Incidentally, that particular record was set using 120 gallons of fuel, which is a good segue into the global geopolitical implications of linking for the first time in human history food production with oil consumption. It is a difficult concept for some people to understand. A barrel of oil produces a trailer of potatoes, and may go some way to understanding, for good or ill, the Western oil wars as of late. Still think Steve Jobs, Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg are game changers? My aim is not to discredit their valid contributions to their generations. My aim is to point out that every generation has these characters, and thus, slowly but surely, chip away at the present adolescent dogma that history is over and everything is a construct.